Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. When it comes to news for EVE Online, we obviously still are not gonna get a lot of major updates or anything like that for the game. It is summertime and that's usually a time when things slow down significantly at CCP. We did get one announcement, which is that the next Alliance tournament is coming later this year with the 2 weekends where the Alliance tournament itself will take place somewhere in November, and I think signups will start in just a couple of days, early August. So if you are part of an alliance that plans to take part in the Alliance tournament, the prizes are really cool. That's definitely something to keep an eye out for. And if you want to speculate on the Alliance tournament, which is absolutely possible, of course, keep an eye on what you can expect the meta to be. Keep an eye on the actual rules to drop so that you have an idea as to what kind of point distribution the different types of ships can have. And then I think especially in the market as it is now, you can make some potentially lucrative trades, especially faction ships could be part of the meta. I think there you could like purchase ahead of time, and during the Alliance tournament there might be some opportunities to sell at crazy prices. But that's all quite speculative, of course, and coming in the future. At the moment, I think it's the streaming weekends that are happening from CCP. Unfortunately, I missed the first one because I was at work. Not much I can do about that. But the vibe there was definitely not all that good on the subreddit, as far as I could tell. Quite a few people are noticing the low player counts in EVE at the moment. Quite a few of them are also speculating that this is really not good and that there's more going on than just a summer slump. I tend to agree with that. I do think that this summer slump will be quite extreme because, of course, this is like the first summer where most of the world will have like not that many restrictions anymore due to the pandemic, and so as a result there is probably a little bit more of a feeling that, yeah, let's take advantage of this summertime and not spend it playing games. I can definitely understand that logic, but I'm pretty sure that the increased cost for the game and then the fact that we don't have any real updates despite some announcements at FanFest, that is not helping things either. But overall, I've mentioned that before as well, I'm still waiting to see what CCP decides to do with the faction warfare stuff, and then I'm also still definitely patient and wanting to see what the 20th anniversary for EVE Online is going to bring. But let's get started. As always, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store, and let's then take a look at what's happening in the market at the moment. So not noticing any sales here, a couple of bundles front and center, then we've got, well, a whole lot of skins and the services, and nothing special to report here. Well, kind of expected, of course. We are at the moment in the middle of summer and there's not too much happening in general. So let's get to the markets and then let's take a look at the pilot services coming in at 320. And obviously something is happening there. You may have seen that on the ticker already as well, with the plex chart continuing to go up, and look at those maximum bars right there going straight through the 4 million mark and well above that. Buyers also forced up and up and up on the prices right here. We still have average prices that are at the low end of the range, so it is still possible to buy plex from the buy orders at the moment, probably a little bit below 4 million, but the price pressure is quite obvious, and then the drop in the amount of trade that's happening is quite obvious as well. So in general, we are well above 4.1 million, 4.16 million for the sellers. Buyers are still stuck at 3.9 million, but I think if we go to the player-owned trade hubs on this one, not that much extra pressure. And then here, player-owned trade hubs, a little bit of downwards pressure on this current increased price for plex, so they're a little bit more competitive in the Tranquility Trading Tower, going to 4.15 million for plex. But this is of course extremely expensive, and well, part of everything that's happening of course is underpinned by the major price hike that is to be introduced in April, and I think it started somewhere in May, but you can see that the uptrend still hasn't stopped, which to me is also a little bit of a surprise. But that is a sign that supply is down quite substantially. Supply is down even more than demand, that with low concurrent player numbers is not a great sign, of course. Well, the economy in general is also not in the best spot. So let's take a look at the multiple pilot train certificates. Stalling, kind of a surprise to me. I thought we would see even more of a catch-up on this one and a continued upward trend, but no, it's actually stalling, not really willing to go above 1.75 billion. Trade on this a couple days ago did collapse to absolutely nothing. When that happened, you can see that the spread started to increase quite massively between min and max, and for some reason big hesitation in the trading certificate. 1.76 billion for a multiple pilot train certificate for the sellers and almost 1.6 billion for the buyers. Not that many buyers in the market anymore. Tranquility Trading Tower not having that much of an impact on this tiny market at this point. It's definitely quite small. These skill extractors next, they are continuing to follow the trend of plex, and I think that we can really call this a market that follows plex and doesn't really lead it. There are exceptions, of course. When CCP introduces a sale that's specific for skill extractors, it can still do its own thing, but you can see how narrow the spread here is. You don't have those big min-max bars, which in the plex market have started to pull the price up quite significantly, and buyers are hesitant to go above 3.9 million here, right? You don't have that at all, and so skill extractors costing 464 million, buyers up to 450 million for the first one as well. Just a 15 million spread between sellers and buyers on something that costs 450. That is not a lot, tiny little spread there, and the trend is of course right in line with plex itself. In general, that probably should mean upwards pressure for the large scale injectors. Let's take a look at what's happening here. Well, more hesitation in my book. You can see here that we actually have the minimum price that are starting to head down towards 750 million ISK, and we're currently trading at the high end of the range, so sellers are still dictating the price, but looks to me like buyers are starting to drop off at the high price of 800 million, of course. 787 now for the sellers, 751 for the buyers, so we still have a tiny margin between sellers and buyers, but this does feel like most sellers have been trying to get or to take advantage of that 800 million ISK price tag for the large scale injector, and that the buyers are actually starting to drop out at that price point, pushing things down and forcing sellers to basically go kind of aggressive. 800, 799, 788, 787, and there we go. We are 13 million down in just a couple of sell orders. Volume wise, they're quite high as well, so pretty aggressive buying here. A first sign that, well, at least the large scale injector market is not willing or able to go to even higher prices, despite the fact that plex is able to do so. Let's see if this translates for the small scale injector as well. And yeah, kind of the same story, basically a little bit more of a pronounced peak a couple of weeks ago as we tried to head for 170, but never made it. Probably 165 or something like that came into play, but then the market sort of choked on those high prices, right? Demand destruction due to too high prices. So we probably went to the 165 range, something like that. And then sellers have started to slowly pump down towards 161. Volume wise, again, quite high in my opinion. 60, 65 of them in a single sell order is quite a few skill injectors that are starting to be dumped, and buyers are at 150 down to 149 and 140 very quickly. Just 3 of them and you're down to the 140 for the buyers. That will then also start to potentially, just like with the large scale injectors, start to build up a spread between the min-max prices and put pressure on the prices. So this is a first sign for me personally that a top might be forming. It's definitely trying to form itself in the skill injector market, and that could have an impact potentially as well on some of the others, for instance plex, that is still steadily rising. It can't go up forever, of course. Eventually prices become so high that demand just get completely obliterated, and that's pretty much what happened for the skill injector market, especially the large scale injector market. 800 million, just too much for people to actually put into the item, and small scale injectors also trying to get back below 160 basically is what buyers want to have happen. Really interesting to see that dynamic show up here after, well, a couple of months of just going straight up to stratospheric prices. Of course, we all know start here in April why that is. Then we get the daily alpha injectors. that are doing a sort of the exact opposite, where the large and the small scale injectors just went up in price and just could not be maintained by the market anymore. We're starting to see that upwards pressure show up here in the daily alpha injector market. It's slowing down already at the tail end, but 5-day moving average still clearly on the upswing. So let's see where those sellers are at. 48.5 million pretty much. Buyers at 43.7, so that's still a little bit of a spread. But I think again, if you look at the amount of buy orders here, it's quite a lot. The amount of sellers is going down. We could be in for the same pattern on the daily alpha injectors, that its suppliers are starting to dwindle. You're paying more for the item, there's lower demand, but for the especially the daily alpha injectors, I personally think that demand could actually stay decently high, right? If you feel, for instance, that the current proposition that CCP has for EVE Online is not worth the $20 on the monthly sub, then something you can do, and I think has been done by quite a few players, is have your subscription lapse, which I think for there was like a 3-month subscription that was really cheap just before the price hike that's starting to really lapse now. But then keep an eye on the game by being an alpha player, and especially if you're like somewhat of a newer player, that daily alpha injector could just be your target, your goal to just stay connected with the game, and that's starting to put upwards pressure on the game, on the prices as well. But in general, it's probably just lower supply, fewer people ponying up money for the daily alpha injectors. Again, really interesting to see if we really break out above 50 million, which I think can happen. What will CCP's response be? Will we have intervention or not? I'm really curious to see if that pattern will show up. Then we've got the hypercores finally that have started to show some upwards pressure on this one as well. 424,000 for the sellers, 400,000 for the buyers. Definitely pretty expensive on the 1-year chart right here. And the slight upswing at the tail end, kind of a surprise. Perhaps what's happening is that there's a little bit more action on the Hypernet relay. You can see here that there's probably some Titans, Supers, Erebus and things like that that are being sold as well. Yeah, maybe again some more veteran players that are trying to turn their Supers into capital. That would require quite a few hypercores. Definitely seeing that upswing in the price when, well, plex is still going up, but the multiple pilot trace certificate and the large scale injectors, small scale injectors, that top to me is probably a sign that eventually demand will drop off enough as well and start to put pressure on these prices. But we'll see, of course, how things evolve. Let's move on to the minerals next at 1250. Like that. As always, we start with titanium, and you may have seen that on the ticker as well. Decently good news, I would say, as we're able to maintain those gains and stay well above 3.8 ISK. Sellers are coming in JITA at least at 391 for most. Someone just came in at 384 with 1.5 million. Should be easily absorbed by the market, but you can see 4 ISK is coming into view on the sell orders. Buyers at 374, showing that, well, for titanium at least, there is this slightly stronger demand than a couple of weeks ago, I think. Nullsec, Siege Green building, maybe even replacing some of the losses, because there has been some more action in Nullsec as well, between like Test, Brave, Fraternity, all of that good stuff. There is definitely a little bit of destruction, a little bit of action to be found in Nullsec. Not a major war or anything like that, but fleets are being flown and some destruction is happening there, which is always good for us miners, because it means that we get slightly better prices for our mining efforts. Then we've got the pyrite market that is actually showing some signs of pressure again. Let's see if we manage to stay above 9. 9 ISK for the sellers, 910 for most, and 891 for the buyers. So there is still this really small margin between sellers and buyers. I do think that there is inherently decently strong demand for these high-sec minerals at the moment, but it's coming from nullsec, and it's probably not like a steady flow across all of them that's going up. There's clearly some hesitation as well, or some potential oversupply on all of this as well. So titanium up a little bit, pyrite pretty much flat for the week, and then we've got Mexalon. That is really good news, I would say. up and well above 60, something we haven't seen for a couple of weeks. But yeah, Mixelon selling at 62 now, buyers still at 58. So you can see whenever we have a little bit of volatility, it's tiny, right? But at least it's a small blip that's visible on the chart. It does open up a little bit of a margin. So there's buyers, there's demand. There is stuff happening in industry, but it's also smart enough to not be spooked by a jump of 4 ISK or something like that from Mixelon. Then those buyers are staying at that 58, and they'll probably push this price back down towards 60 quite easily. In general, still pretty obvious, your focus for high-sec mining should be on Mixelon, and for titanium and both pyrite, in my opinion, it's okay to sell at the current prices. If you want to build up a little bit of a reserve, that is fine as well, but I would say don't hold off expecting way better prices later down the line. This is the new reality for miners, especially in high-sec. Those prices are what they are. The needs are a little bit less, especially in titanium. There's plenty of supply for the current activity in the game, so don't expect these prices to do anything all too drastic. Might be different in low-sec, and last week we were actually seeing pressure on the low-sec minerals, and Isogen is confirming that. Look at that, the drop off from 450 towards 350 on the chart. The hesitation is quite substantial. 389 for the sellers, 355 for the buyers. Get a 77 million units are showing up here at 390. Down here we get another 13-14 million probably at 395, and then if we keep going down, there's those guys that have started basically the whole ruckus, you could say. 24-25 million at 423, another 20 million at 423. So it is, in my opinion, those some of those big supplies that are causing price shocks, together with, in all likeliness, a little bit of less demand maybe, or a slight oversupply for those low-sec minerals at the moment. Might just be easier to get some of these done at the moment than the null-sec ones. And so we're seeing that pressure here in Isogen. Definitely the 78 million units right here won't be good if you're hoping for even higher prices for Isogen, but eventually I do still think that we'll chew through this one, especially if we do so after the summer. Even more activity there potentially could turn this around. But yeah, I warned about this, you could say, when we started seeing 350 come into play, and then we had the same thing happen as we pushed down towards 300 for a couple of weeks. The times when we went straight up from 100 ISK to 300 ISK, right, without ever seeing any real correction in the price, those times are over. We are going to start to see some real hesitation, correction, price setting in the Isogen market at this point, and we won't just stratospherically go up to 600, 1100 or whatever. Some may speculate on what the Isogen price is actually going to be, and a big reason for this pullback, in my opinion, is what's happening in the Noxium market. That is now down to a pronounced one-year low point, well below 1000 ISK. We're talking 835 for the sellers, 762 for the buyers. And let me know in the comments if you've got any idea on this one, but I'm personally heading, leaning towards that this is a supply side thing, that it's been very lucrative, right above 1000 ISK for most of the year. You even had an awesome winter period here, January up to March, when this was the most expensive mineral except for morphite. And so I do think that there have been groups that have organized themselves around low-sec mining, bringing in Noxium at a more steady pace with probably more safety than a couple of months ago, and that this has started to bring those prices back down. It's becoming less and less lucrative because of all of this, and then as a side effect you get a little bit more Isogen. And right now, with the summer slump in general, or the slump you could say in general in the game, doesn't have to be a summer time slump for everyone, yeah, we are seeing the impact on the price. One-year low point for Noxium, that is of course inherently going to put pressure on the Isogen price as well. The fact that it's not crashing down even more than what we're seeing here, I think, is a sign that the potential longer term for Isogen is still on the upside. Once we get rid of, well, another 70 million here, another 50 million down here at 423, we should go higher for Isogen. That's my read on the situation, but at the moment, in general, more stuff is being mined in low sec, is being brought to the market, and that is causing the price corrections of the moment. Then for nullsec, it's been the exact opposite. While Noxium has been going down substantially, here is the Zydrine chart going up substantially. Not fully sure why that is. Part of it, I think, will be cartel manipulation, you could say. This has to be imported from pretty much all of nullsec. And so there's definitely easy ways for big groups to dominate these markets and to set the price, you could say. But I also think that the fact that we are seeing a little bit more action on some of the big groups that have been deploying and are potentially not focusing that much on mining and moon mining at this point, that this is the part of the reason why these prices are so high at the moment. So Zydrine is selling for 1720, buyers coming in at 1620, healthy spread of 1,000 here between sellers and buyers. So I personally don't think we'll shoot up to like 2000 ISK or anything like that, but clearly very close to 1 year high points. Super expensive Zydrine. And then for Megasite, right, same upswing as well, up to 1750 as well at the high point last week, down a little bit. Well, you can't keep climbing eternally. We see that on all of the items. 1640, 1650 for most sellers, and then 1570 for the buyers. So a little bit of pullback on the Megasite front, but nullsec is really expensive at the moment. While these have gone up substantially, the Noxium market and the Isogen market are the ones that are struggling. Those that have been the largest winner for most of the year are the ones that are struggling here. And I do think that this is really awesome, how it shows that CCP has managed to basically pull these markets apart, right? High sec minerals, really cheap, plentiful, and but also of course coming from high sec. So there we do have this steady supply, this starting ground, you could say. Then we've got now low sec, which used to be the most expensive mineral. I do think that low sec has organized a little bit more to bring more supplies to bear in more safety than when all of these changes first happened. So they're at their own dynamic, right, going down at the moment. They clearly have their own dynamic, they're their own market. And then we get nullsec, that is well, having to come from nullsec, and these are super high at the moment for whatever it is that's happening in nullsec. So I do think that this is really interesting, part of what CCP wanted to have happen as well. If activity would drop off too much in high sec, right, not enough new players, things like that, you'll eventually get higher prices for those high sec minerals as well. Although you could say alts are in high sec, and there is going to be supply from that as well. But in general, I do think this is healthier for the game than getting everything from potentially a certain place or source. And so this incentivizes trade, brings in volatility. Who would have thought a couple of months ago that we would see Noxium well below 1000? I did not. So this dynamic in the game has changed, which I think is a healthier situation than a couple of years ago. But it doesn't make things easy, of course. Well, that's EVE Online. Finally, we still have the Morphite chart. That's really its own thing because it is tied to the Tech 2 economy rather than the Tech 1 economy. And it's basically still pretty flat as it has been for the last couple of months. 42,000 for the sellers, below 39,000 for the buyers. So a little bit of spread, and I think we are starting to see a little bit of a wavy movement around that 40k. So this one could eventually maybe tumble over or go up in price substantially. It really depends, of course, on a lot more factors. But the one that has basically done complete opposite of all the others, or something different from all the others, is Morphite, that has been stable around 40k for the last 4 months or so. So a very versatile market here in the minerals market in general. Next up, we've got PI. Expect a little bit more of a uniform situation there at 2410. Let's take a look at these, and I'm still waiting for the top to be formed here. I still think that eventually we should see cheaper prices, but here are the broadcast notes, for instance, going up to 1.5 million, holding on quite well to that price, and actually up for the last couple of months, well above 1.5 for the sellers, almost 1.4 million for the buyers. No sign of this market slowing down. all that much. Don't see that much extra demand, right? So we could drop off, but I think it's basically strong enough that we will keep things in check for the foreseeable future. And then construction blocks, I thought we would start to turn the corner, but no, still well above 9,000 disc, pretty much a 1-year high point for construction blocks. 9.6, almost 9.7 for the sellers, 9,100 for the first buyer as well, showing signs of desperate. This is a real surprise to me, but this shows that there is strong demand for PI and supplies are basically steady to maybe even down a little bit, why we are seeing these high prices. And for this to happen during the summer is a real surprise to me, because if there's one thing that's easy to maintain, or should be easy to maintain, that's really passive, it is of course PI. Supplies of PI should not be a problem. And so counter to my intuition, PI is actually doing really well price wise so far and is able to hold on quite well, at least so far. Let's take a look at coolants. Well, staying above 9,000 disc yet again at the end of the week. 9,250 for the sellers, 8,850 pretty much for the buyers. That's a super narrow margin between sellers and buyers. And so while it's not as good as January up to March, let's not forget for coolants and for anything that requires water, in March with the Siege Green update, they have been nerfed substantially, as the need for water in the economy in general was reduced substantially by CCP. That's this pullback, so this is not like a demand problem or anything like that. And then for coolants to stay this strong above 9K is actually pretty damn impressive. Enriched uranium next tried to, fell back a little bit after a couple of days at 11,000 disc. I think maybe some reserve, some supply found their way into the market, but look at that over the last week, back above 10,000 disc, 10,300 for the sellers, 9.7 for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin, really strong demand, very steady as well on the volumes here. So taking advantage of these lower prices, buyers came in, stocked up on enriched uranium, and I can only assume that these are being used at the moment wherever it is that they are needed. And I again do think that it's in nullsec that most of that stuff is happening, or at least nullsec related. Then we get the integrity response drones, and yeah, this is completely against my own expectation. I thought we would get a slow breakdown, and then eventually, after we stayed below 2.5 for a little bit, we would see more supplies coming in and we would start to normalize maybe towards 2 million or anything like that. We're doing the exact opposite. We're heading towards 3 million on this one. 2.9 million for the sellers, 2.7 million for the buyers, and we've got way more demand than supply at the moment. I did not expect this, but PI seems to be in a pretty damn great place, at least price wise here. 1-year high point for integrity response drones, 2.5 months after the Siege Green update. The biggest winner adds another top. That's definitely impressive and not what I thought would happen. Then we've got mechanical parts making their way back above 10K as well. Yep, 10,260 for the sellers, 9.7 for the buyers. Same story, surprisingly strong demand. You can also see how these buyers here on those minimum prices are just going up and up and up, being more and more aggressive on the mechanical parts. Really impressive to see. Then we get miniature electronics, right? Basically moving in the highest range for the year as well over the last month or so. 12.4 for the sellers, 12,000 disc for the buyers. Yeah, super impressive. Nano factories, some of them not doing that well on the full 1-year chart, but still nano factories are going for 1 million. Ooh, that's actually nice, right? Look at that. So these sellers have actually gone up to 1 million ISK here. Buyers are still at 871, so here a bit more hesitation, bit of a spread that's opening up. But let's see who wins. If all the others here are any indication, then I would not be surprised that buyers will be forced up above the 900, and then 1 million for nano factories could become the situation. And yeah, super impressive actually. Organic mortar applicators also bumping up from the 700k, and are we really above 800k for the sellers already? Yeah, look at that, 800, 820, 840 coming into view. Buyers still at 655, so they're holding off. They're waiting to see exactly what happens, but that's the real question. Will demand show up here, and will we push organic mortar applicators as well towards the high end of the range? Price wise, I'm starting to think it could happen. It would be a real surprise, but it could be very interesting to see how things evolve here in August. Then we get recursive computing modules. This one was actually losing a little bit of ground, managed to be above 1 million for the Siege Green update right here, right March, above 1 million most of the time. Broke down a little bit, but at the tail end we are starting to head back up. 911,000 for the sellers, 740 for the buyers. Same story, big spread between sellers and buyers. Not that many are showing up in the advanced PI materials, but for the more basic stuff we tend to have strong demand. Here is robotics, 1 year high point pretty much as well, selling for 76.5, 73.4 for the buyers. That's pretty damn impressive. Rocket fuel, look at that, going up right now, basically 12k on the sellers, probably super high. Yeah, 12.2 for the sellers, 11.2 for the buyers, more of a normal spread, but it is on, again, a late rally in my book. 1 year high point right now for rocket fuels. Who would have thought that that would happen? Not me, that's for sure. So at the moment I would say, if, like me, you're someone that does PI still on a daily basis, and sticks to relatively easy stuff to make, like up to refined PI materials, it's selling time. Sell, sell, sell. These are really amazing prices. Self-harmonizing power core still holding on very easily to the gains from the Siege Green update right here. 2.2 million for the sellers, 2.1 million for the buyers. Look how aggressive these guys are. It's also 2,700 units, 1,600 units. Very, very surprisingly strong demand for this one. Then we get smart fab units. We have to have our exceptions. It is a specialized PI material that's only going for 60k. You can see how small the market is as well, and a little bit of supply probably bringing prices down. Yeah, 55,000 for the sellers, 41,000 for the buyers. So you do have some exceptions, but in general I would say we're doing pretty damn well. Sterile conduits holding on decently well for the week, 913 to 816. Right, advanced PI, that's not part of the big winners like the integrity response drones are a little bit different, and it's gonna be interesting because what I'm seeing here is that both sides are waiting. Sellers are staying at above 900,000. They're not willing to like dump all their sterile conduits and bring prices down to ridiculously low levels, but buyers are also staying at that 800k level and are saying, yeah, bring on the supply. It feels a little bit like a real battle between sellers and buyers here on who is going to give in first. Will sellers become a little bit desperate and bring prices down, or will buyers need more sterile conduits and actually be willing to push prices up? Very, very cool. Then we get supercomputers, not that big of a market again for specialized. Still 69,000 for the sellers and 67,000 for the buyers. So that is not bad at all demand wise. And then we get synthetic oil, if it wants to load. Went to a 1 year high point of 10k in June. Pays a little bit of a price for that one. And at the moment, down to 8,000 is 6.5 for the buyers, and this was actually the pattern that I was expecting to generalize or to be the general situation in PI at the moment. You can see that the problem here is that demand just drops off, goes down to 6.5 and just will not budge, and that there are enough suppliers to on a front page to bring the price down from 9,000 disk to 8,000 disk, which can happen especially if you bring in 120,000 units. I thought this would be the general trend in the PI material, so be a little bit careful, right? And I would say take advantage of the current high prices if you can, because they might not last forever. Of course, right here it would look also really amazing, and who knows if a lot of these goods are not right at this situation as well. So be a little bit careful. You gotta be a little bit fast. I think we could still see the summer slump just coming in a little bit late, but in general, I'm still really surprised at how well the market is doing. Synthetic synapses going for 93,000, buyers at 86,000. Decent amount. Again, we keep these in here for a slightly different reason. They're tied to implants, and we do know that CCP is planning stuff with the implants slash attributes for training, so that could be interesting if we could buy low, which is not happening at the moment. Transcranial microcontrollers 86k to 80k, again decently strong demand. Next up we get water-cooled CPU. That's another one of those that doesn't see a lot of use or trade, it would seem. Less than 5,000 for the sellers, 3.8 for the buyers. Compare that to coolants, for instance. These are extremely low prices, of course. And then we get the wetware mainframes that are going back up, trying to get back to that 175, definitely trading at the high end of its range. 173 for the sellers, 154 million for the buyers. More healthy spread, you could say. So still, you know, potentially going back down a little bit because the buyers are not that much above 1.5 million, but the current trade range is obviously pretty high as well. So for me, really awesome news, of course. Very high PI prices, not what I expected, but pretty easy to take advantage of. Doesn't take a lot of effort, and so that's definitely what I'm planning to do at the moment. But I do want to give that warning, right? Synthetic oil here could be an example of what lies in wait on lower activity. Eventually, perhaps, orders will be filled, and then things could turn around very quickly. Next up, advanced moon materials, 35.45. There we go. As always, we start with the carbide. So here is crystalline carbonite for Galente production, and yeah, sort of what I warned a couple of days ago. Right here, you get average prices at, let's see if I can get that to show, 82 ISK here, really low. And on that bump and on this bump, it was like, yeah, are we seeing a little bit more volatility? Will action in nullsec be able to bring things around? For instance, not enough moon mining anymore, less supply, higher prices. It's just not happening at the moment. Less than 90 for the sellers, 88 for the buyers. Super close to a 1-year low point, and yeah, we just keep losing momentum on any upswing at this point as well. I think basically the market is getting exhausted of buying the dips, you could say, right here. Well below 100 buy. Yeah, we managed to make our way back above 100. We go well below again. Yeah, on a couple of days we managed to push back above 100, but market does feel like it's getting a little bit exhausted. Which, if you follow markets, eventually this is potentially also the sign of a turnaround when, I mean, there is like a chart that explains like the psychology, right, where you've got like exuberance on the upswing, and then eventually you get that top where there's like hesitation, but right, people are still hopeful, so they're still willing to buy the dip. And what you gotta look for is here, which is eventually like capitulation, where players say, this is it, this stuff is just not worth anything, it's never coming back anymore. And you can start to see that on these lower and lower tops. That's when you'll find a real bottom, and that's when it's probably your time to jump in. So this does start to feel like the market, at least for crystalline carbonite, is starting to capitulate. Let's see what the Caldari one is doing. That one still had a nice premium last time and is doing a little bit better. Right here we went down to well below 100 ISK as well in April, but we're still holding on to 137 for the sellers and 134 for the buyers. So clearly this one is doing way better than the Galente one. And then for Minmatar, it's a Fernite carbide that's slowly, not slowly, on a big volume spike, making its way back above 100 ISK, 106 to 102 now for this one. So here, big buyer coming in. That's obviously what happened. Kind of waiting for that one to show up. Well, someone has probably been buying here as well on the crystalline carbonite chart, but I'm probably tempted to take a dive at this one. And then we finally have tungsten for Amar. That also, look at those volumes as we land on the 100 ISK for a couple of days, like maybe 10 days even or something like that. Here's the investment pushing us up to the 125 mark, 123 for the buyers as well. And that's the same question. Was this right? You went here back up to above 125, below 100. Touched 125, you could say, below 100, less, right? So this kept going down. Was this capitulation, this final move down towards 100 ISK, is this where these investors were right to move in? Well, only the future will tell, but if that's the pattern, then right now in crystalline carbonite, that's also where we are at right now. So really interesting, in my opinion, as well. From an investor standpoint, it does feel like more and more people are giving up on the carbides market, except for the Caldari one. That one is still enjoying a very nice premium. Well, let's see what's happening in the metamaterials then. Maybe that gives us more of an idea. Here is photonic metamaterials for Galente. Slight uptick from pretty much a one-year low point around 7k as well. 7.4 for the sellers, 7.4 for the buyers. So a little bit more buying power coming in on this one as well. Then we've got Caldari, which is non-linear metamaterials. That one is starting to show a little bit of pressure, but was again enjoying a pretty massive premium compared to everything else. 12.450 for the sellers, 12.260 for the buyers. And then we've got the Minmatar one, which is plasmonic metamaterials, holding on to 12.50 as well. 12, almost 13,000 for the sellers, 12.3 for the buyers. And again, a little bit of buying coming in here. And then for Amar, it's terahertz metamaterials that is continuing to struggle and is basically flat for the last week or so at its one-year low point. 9.4 for the sellers, 9.250 for the first buyer. So it's also a little bit more of a mixed picture yet again in these terahertz metamaterials, with Caldari gaining and the Galente version. Here is photonic metamaterials yet again trading at a range that's well below everything else as well. So is this the jumping point? Might still be early, but I do personally like the fact that here, right, no one really came in to buy the dip anymore, you could say. Quick, I need to drink here, just 1 second. Like that, as we move on to the other advanced move materials. So maybe that can give us a little bit of an idea for the general trend, and that's not good. Fermionic condensate, big volumes, prices down. That's a desperate dump, pretty much at 50k, 45k, something like that. We're down to 38 for the sellers, 31.6 for the buyers, 0 buyers in the market basically. Ferrogel also going down below 20,000 ISK, seeing a lot of pressure. 19.9 for the sellers, 19.3 for the buyers. That's not great. Then we've got Fullerites. That was our real exception, you could say, for last week. Tried to bump its way up to 700 ISK. Super impressive. Are we back? Is this the bottom? Well, here is the response. There's plenty of supply, including probably speculators out there that wanted to take advantage of those prices, and so too much came in, and we find ourselves right back down to 460 for the sellers, 420 for the buyers. I did kind of expect that to happen on the Fullerites, that it would not last long, and that's exactly what's happening here. Hypersynaptic fibers, slight pressure at the tail end. I mean, it's not the bottom, but it's definitely not a great price. 5.4 to 5,400 to 5,100. Nano transistors now doing a little bit of a bump up to 3,000 ISK. Yeah, but it's 2.8 or 2.9 almost to 2.8, so slightly better demand on this one, but how long will it last? We will see. Phenolic composites, also a bit of a bump. Interesting, almost 1,200. Then we've got pressurized oxidizers are also turning the corner, or trying to turn the corner, making their way back above 7,500. In fact, 8.2 for the sellers. Then we get reinforced carbon fiber, still pretty much flat, but at least not going down even lower. And finally, ceramic fibers also doing a little bit of a bump. And this is definitely interesting. This also does potentially feel like over the last couple of months here, for instance, for ceramic fibers, players have basically given up on the item. There was no demand, so we were stuck well below 300 ISK, and maybe finally a little bit more activities coming in that might be more structural, but for that you need to be in the know, of course. And I'll be honest, I don't know enough about all the cycles that all these items are involved in to give you a good read on that one. But while we do have our hopeful, oops, where was it? Here we go, the Fullerites, that was severely punished for daring to be first and shooting back to 700 ISK, and is now basically cratered back down to the lowest end of its range. A lot of the others are starting to show signs of trying to at least form a bottom here as well. Difficult to call, of course, as always in the markets. Let's see if there's an impact on Take-Two ships, coming in at 44.20. Like that, we start as always with Basilisk and Cerberus, couple of Caldari ships that are dropping back towards the low end of their trade range, 136 million to 128. You are once again buying a Basilisk on the buy orders below 130 million. And looking at the chart, you can see that pressure here again with those minimum prices able to go back down. I think you're able to grab one below 130 at the moment. Then we've got the Cerberus, same story, although not willing to go to a 1 year low point. 142 for the sellers, 135 for the buyers. You're buying a Cerberus well below 140 million ISK right here. That doesn't seem like a bad deal either. Next, here is the Curse. Unfortunately, I did not buy any of these. Should have done so 2 weeks ago on this dip. Obviously, we're back at the 150 million mark. In fact, 164 million for the sellers and 139 million for the buyers on not enough supply. So potentially we could build on this a little bit, but the real question is, will new supply find its way, and will there be buyers that have bought these dips that are saying this is enough of a profit for me, I'm going to start to dump? So will we start to see this wavy pattern get confirmed, or can we form a bottom? I would personally say that we are likely, at least in the Take 2 ships, to still get crushed by supply quickly. Then we get the Damnation still hovering at the low end of the range. You can see those minimum prices now going below 250. 263 million to 242 million. If you want a Damnation, I have a couple already, but it's a command ship with great potential, Take 2 armor, all of that stuff. Quite a few slots if I'm not mistaken as well. Let's take a quick look at the fittings. Yeah, 7 high with 5 launchers, so you can add in probes, you can add in a cloak, 4 mates and 6 lows. You can definitely make a pretty bulky, tanky armor ship out of the Damnation, and it's basically going as low as it's been, so pretty cool. Then we get the Deacon also hovering with minimum prices still below 15 million, 17 to 14.5. This, for instance, starts to, for me at least, be slightly interesting for the Alliance tournament perspective. If I'm not mistaken, at least in some of the previous Alliance tournaments, like, slots were filled from time to time with some of these logistics frigates because they tended to be pretty cheap. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm definitely not a specialist. Correct me if I'm wrong on all of this, but my speculation is that for leftover points, stuff like logistics frigates are pretty interesting in the Alliance tournament potentially. Next, we've got one of the meta ships. Here is the Eagle. So this one did manage to do a bump up above 200 million, but the general trend is down yet again. So a month ago 200 million, now 121 million, and buyers are below 120. Definitely seeing some pressure this week in those Caldari ships here. Then we get the EOS, 1 year low point, goes below 250, 251 for the sellers, 235 for the buyers. I bought mine, I think, a little bit above 250. I was already happy with that price, so you can do even better, but don't feel bad for me. That was not an investment, that was basically a ship that I bought planning to fit it and use it eventually. Then we've got the Ares that's stuck at 37.5. I mean, on some of these there's really not a lot to say, except here, for instance, the Flycatcher, another Caldari ship that had a little bit of a better time in the last month or so, but the pressure is right back, and buyers are at around 40 million. Yeah, 40 for the buyers, 45 million for the sellers. Flycatchers also amazing ships, by the way, especially for some of the events, right? Take 2, but it's a destroyer, lots of launchers, shields, so you can definitely make a pretty beefy PvE ship out of that can hit above its weight as well, but that has basically speed, tank, and nice damage protection thanks to its missiles. Definitely something, if you don't have any, I already have a couple of Flycatchers. If you don't have any, they're super cheap at the moment, and they're definitely useful in some of the events that CCP does. Then we've got the Guardian, yeah, flat at 130, buyers probably well below that, yeah, below 120 even. Heretic, slight move back up to 40 million ISK, but it's not that great. Buyers are at 35. And then we get the Hound, went up to 20, so this was definitely a trade that could have been made on just following Eve Talk, right? Notice it goes below 15 million, definitely felt like a place that you could jump in, and then it went up to 20 million, a little bit as expected. Smaller ships, can potentially have more volatility if they have the volumes for it, and stealth bombers tend to do that. So we are going back down at the moment, 18 to 17 million, but you can see how close this gap stays, and that's what you want, right? Get the market to be oversupplied massively, buy them below 15, sell at 20, you've got a nice profit, which is not that easy to do on the bigger ships. Or the ships with the lower volumes. Ikitursa back below 500, yep, just below 500 million for the sellers, 477 for the buyers. Then we've got our Ishtar, went below 130, pushed back a little bit on that, but we're heading back down. 127 million in fact for the sellers, including 99 of them coming in here. This is what I'm really fearful of. I think we'll see a bottom in advanced moon materials before we see bottoms in the Tech 2 ships, and this is really for me a sign that things are not over just yet, just like where the EOS, I believe, went to an even lower point than where I was like, I'm gonna buy one just because it's so low. The Ishtar is showing signs that even below 130 is not going to be a consensus, or staying above 130 is not going to be a consensus for the Ishtar. Then next we've got the Kirin, did a little bump as well, is coming back down, but would be great to buy below 15, still at 17 million for the buyers. So same story, right? Slightly better volumes, 20, 30 a day. And a small ship, that means you get potentially some more volatility. Manticore, same story, went up to 25 million even. That's very nice. Buy probably 16, 17 million, get back out at 25, above 20. Right now, look at those minimum prices dropping off sharply yet again. 18.5 to 16 million, so you're buying at 16. Honestly, that's not bad. If you want to take 2 trade, Manticore is potentially there to be bought. Then we've got the Nemesis, same story, right? Stealth bomber, you could have bought these well below 15 million before, selling here close to 20, currently going back down, still too early to jump back in, but still below 15 for the sellers, 13.2 for the buyers. You could almost say getting in on a couple of the Nemesis stealth bombers makes sense as well. Nighthawk flat at 300, not much to say. Oneros heading back towards its 1-year low point at 100 million for a logistics cruiser. Could be interesting as well. Maybe try to buy it below 100 million, but for me, again, not that I don't fly logistics myself, but for the Alliance tournament, this could maybe be interesting. Purifier heading for a 1-year low point as well, below 15 for the sellers, below 14 million for the buyers. So you're not going to buy below 13 million with 100 being bought here, but you are potentially buying below 14 million. That's another one. Yeah, if you're looking for that Take 2 trade, Nemesis, Purifier, they look to be in the right spot for that. Rook made its way back up a little bit, showing signs of pressure already. Saber still very low at 40, Scalpel flat, not much to say. Scimitar, Sleipnir, yeah, I'm gonna go through these a little bit more quickly unless we find some real action potentially. Zarmast also still pretty low. So the general vibe in the Tech 2 ships is clearly that there is still oversupply, they're super cheap at the moment, and unfortunately, if you look for instance at the Ishtar, with 99 of them being done below 130 million, it still shows that a real turnaround for the market is not to be expected anytime soon. So I would still stick with, if you want to trade, look for the high volume and small ships, stealth bombers, some logistics frigates are there. Otherwise, look for those low prices for ships that you might be interested in flying later down the line. Tech 3 is next, coming in at 53.30. There we go. Let's see what the destroyers are doing. So the Confessor, a little bit of pressure, minimum price is going below 50 million, 54 for the 53 for the sellers and 48 million for the buyers. Not what I expected, but we're basically slowing down on the speculative moves, you could say, and we are normalizing around 50, which is lower than what I thought. Hecate also heading to breaking below 55 million. Yeah. 54 million for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers already. Look at the last 24 hours. Actually quite a few ships coming in. Decent amount of buyers as well that are looking for 50 million. Then we've got the Jackdaw also going down below 55 million. 54 for the sellers, 51 for the buyers. And supply-wise, again, quite decent as well. So seeing a little bit of excuse me, pressure on the tactical destroyers, at least the first three that in my opinion tend to be the most popular. But yeah, volumes are not that great, I don't think, unless Nelsec then decides that, yeah, we're gonna buy a fleet all of a sudden. I think we're here for a little bit more pressure, but it will probably remain limited, as again part of the higher price ranges that we're seeing for these ships at the moment is the fact that gas is needed so much more for faction ships at the moment that are extremely expensive, and so I don't expect them to really like go down substantially in price all of a sudden, where they would become something to consider, especially compared to the current Tech 2 ship prices. So why would you pay that 55 million for a Jackdaw when basically a bit above 100 million gets you an Ishtar, right? The value proposition there probably is not worth it for the large alliances and things like that. And then we get this Vapel that's also showing signs of that pressure, but was already at a lower range. Look at those minimum prices going even lower in the last couple of days. 47 million to 42.5 million. Now, if you're feeling really speculative, and I would say that, yeah, that this is where you've got less predictability now, where before a couple of years ago, tactical destroyer market was the predictable one. You could easily buy low, sell high. If you're feeling like taking a bit of a gamble, you could maybe jump in on some of these lower prices, especially the Confessor, I think, well below 50. Could be interesting, but it doesn't feel like a sure thing at this point. Let's take a look at the cruisers next. Here is the Legion, seeing even more pressure at around 180, 179 for the sellers, no buyers at 165. You're buying a Legion below 180. If you're looking to trade in Tech 3, you know, this for instance would be my jumping point. Then we get the Loki. Right, last week was probably your jumping point. You could have probably bought these below 180 at that point. We're talking 190 now for the sellers, 165 for the buyers. And this still looks right. Oh, well, I can still buy well below 180. So that should be easy. I mean, we're seeing a little bit of pressure here, but don't forget, look at the last 7 days. Where is the average trade price happening? At the 190, and that means that nobody is going to dump, or next to nobody is going to dump the Loki at the 165 when they're seeing the sell prices, and it's also confirmed here by the daily averages. So it's very difficult on an upswing to grab a buy order. It's a lot easier on this side of the chart just before the bottom to grab one of these buy orders. So you could still try to buy a Loki below 170, but I don't think it's going to trigger. Basically right now you can buy a Legion below 170, and looking at the chart you're gonna get it as well. Then we've got the Proteus chart that's also showing signs of pressure, but I would love to see a breakdown well below 180 before I jump in. 185 to 174. We are on the downside, so maybe you can grab the buy order, but it won't be as good, I think, as the Legion. And then finally we've got the Tengu that's also bumping up a little bit and then showing signs of pressure, actually quite a lot of pressure right now. We're talking 177 to 166. You're buying a Tengu below 170. That's below the entire chart, and I think on this pressure right here, last couple of daily averages, look at that one going down, so they're not able to say we're all trading at this range. Nope, some of them are desperate enough to dump. Yeah, you can also buy a cheap Tengu at the moment. So Tengu Legion, if you're looking for that Tech 3 trade, I think those are your opportunities to buy at the moment. And then finally we've got the extra product for the week. Before that I'm gonna do a little bit more drinking. And there we go. It feels like it's a little bit dusty, but extra product request from last week. Someone wanted me to look at the compressed ore market. 58, 55, let's say. So let's take a look at those. Now it's always a huge list, so I can't go over everything, single one of them, but we'll try to get a little bit of a feel of what's happening. So compressed, let's see here. Batch of ooh, does it always say batch before that now? What? Okay, so there's gonna be, is that because of the, let me know in the comments. I'm not sure, I still have not compressed anything in an Orca, but is that the difference? Is batch compressed Arcanor something that comes from the Orca? And then you've got compressed, no, that's abyssal stuff, Bistot though. Yeah, here is compressed Arcanor. That's what you still do from a structure. Is that right? Or am I wrong? That does mean that the list of compressed ores is now just completely ridiculously long. But let's see if I can then maybe do compressed Veld just to see. So here is batch compressed Veldspar. A little bit of volatility between 1100 almost and 1500. And then for the compressed Veldspar, it's just, what the hell, price 11.43 and this one 14. Yeah, so there's got to be a difference there, and so that's probably what we want to watch, because that's where the market will be. So let's see what happens if I do batch. That's more reasonable. So again, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm assuming that that's the case, and let me know in the comments if I'm right on this. The batch compressed is the stuff that you make from the new compressor modules, from an Orca, from Porpoise, or well, basically a mining command chip, and they have like different amounts in them than the regular compressed stuff. That's interesting, because I've actually still done a little bit of compressing not that long ago in a structure, so I didn't know about that. But here, for instance, look at the compressed Arcanor. That's going for 258,000 a pop, 173 for the buyers. Big margin between sellers and buyers, so I would say that this market is not really mature enough on some of the high-end stuff. But if you look at Azure Plagiar class, well, 4,000 for the sellers, 3,000 for the buyers. Average prices all over the place, so you're actually buying for 3K as well, and sometimes and sellers of course can sell as well. That's a big spread, I have to say. Bit of surprise. Let's go to the most common one, which is going to be Veldspar. So batch compressed Veldspar has a spread of 1400 to 1200, so that's a little bit more mature. That's a little bit better. But once we go to like more obscure things, here is Umber, 90k to 30k for the buyers. Look at that, and then let's try to see if we can see those daily min-max. So sometimes you're selling here as well, 120,000, and sometimes they are just dumping that stuff for 30k as well. Right, not what I expected. Kernite, I think, is pretty common, has a spread of 80k to 20k. Let's see if it's because of the player on trade hubs. Nope, it's all happening in JITA. Quick look at Jaspet, for instance. That's not available. Nice is 400k to 311. That's still a pretty damn big margin. Golden Umber has a spread of 35 to 21k. Fiery Kernite, spread of 73, and then 1000 ISK. And look at that, just a couple of weeks ago this stuff was being dumped at 1000 ISK on average. It's now going for 75k. So this still feels like an immature market that's not completely that hasn't really completely materialized. I'm not exactly sure what to say. You can also see that the weird spreads have really started since April, since the Siege Green update, I would say, and maybe also since the higher prices. Not sure if that's gonna be related. Maybe some alts are not being used for compression, but definitely feels a little bit weird. Look how stable things are here, and then in May things just go completely haywire in this batch compressed market. So I'm honestly not sure. I'm actually a little bit surprised by what we're seeing here in the data. Let me know in the comments what you think is happening with the batch compressed ores, and let me know if I'm right that this is stuff that's basically coming from the compressor module on ships, and that the other compressed ore is coming from structures, because I am still not 100% sure on that. But if you're looking then to actively trade stuff or to basically be able to buy super low, it does feel like this is the market to look into, because those buy orders do trigger from time to time. I mean, you'll have dry spells, that's pretty obvious as well with those daily averages, but it does happen. And then you're looking, of course, at some really cheap stuff that you manage to buy. So yeah, interesting, but unfortunately that's become, right, for just the regular compressed stuff, or all of the compressed stuff, that's just become such a huge unmanageable list that it's not really something look at that I think anyone can just go through. We have to just get the general feeling, and so I'm kind of counting on you guys. If you have any input on what's happening with the compressed ores, I would love to see that one in the comments. That's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.